all clear?
Yeah, I think Jeff is almost there.
Yeah, just adjusting the channel. 1 sec, sorry.
We're just making sure we're live feeding correctly on YouTube and on the website. Almost there.
Good to go.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Mayor. You are recording on the website.
Okay, Nina, thank you very much, members of council and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my and our apologies for being a few minutes late. We did run into, of course, a few technical glitches there. So we will get this council meeting of April 27th underway. And I will call this meeting to order. So, and of course, the first item of business on our agenda today is a moment of silent reflection and then our national anthem, and we will get business underway. So a moment of silent reflection. Our national anthem, O Canada. Again, thank you very much. Now, first of all, to our clerk, are there any amendments and or announcements, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two announcements. The first one, we've received written submissions from Ian Thompson, Kim Bradshaw, and Wendy Roberts with respect to staff report COM 00120, climate change, corporate initiatives, and updates. We've circulated these submissions to members of council in accordance with the town's procedure bylaw. The second announcement is that an addendum to this council agenda was posted on Friday, April 24th, with respect to a confidential session to take place near the end of this afternoon's agenda. We just wanted to note that the live stream and the recording will be paused during this time, and it will start up again once confidential session is concluded and council resumes in open session.
Thanks for that, and I will assume that all members of council got the submissions by the public on the climate change, and we'll be dealing with that a little bit later on as well. When we get into the in-camera session, there's a few things that we'll have to do, so we'll try and keep things on track for that as well. So any of my colleagues, do they have any disclosures of interest this morning? I will assume that none of my colleagues have any disclosures. Now, Have a resolution moved by Councillor Ali and seconded by Councillor Best, and be it resolved that consent items numbers 1 to 13 be approved. Now, I'm aware that Councillor Hamid has already suggested he wants item number 7 and 8 pulled out, and that'll be done. I'm also led to believe that Councillor Chalmers, you have an item or two that you wish pulled out, and I don't have those numbers. Councillor Chalmers.
He's muted.
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so 5, 6, 9, and 12.
5, 6, 9, and 12. Is there any other member of council, any item that they wish pulled out and dealt with separately?
Mr. Mayor, I'll be speaking to number 9 as well.
Okay,
Councillor
very
Melvin.
good. Yeah, good. Thanks, Rick. Okay, I'm going to take them in order. Number 5, Councillor Chalmers.
And I'll be brief on all of them. I thought the report on 2019 was very good. Unfortunately, it's not going to foretell what's going to happen in 2020 with transit as a result of what we're all living through. I had one question, though, with respect to where we are today. On Friday, there was an announcement of door-to-door service for seniors. And I just wanted to know, Your Worship, through you, what the cost of that is and what the impact of that is on the 2020 budget.
Again, I'm not sure, Glenn, you might be the most appropriate to address that one, Glenn, or Christina. Christina?
Hi there, it's Christine here. Through your worship to Councillor Challoner, there is no cost outright for that service. We are actually going to be using some additional capacity that we have right now in our specialized transit system. And this came through the Community Leadership Roundtable, which Joy Anderson is a part of, along with all of the Halton regions, whereby it was determined that a lot of seniors are having problems getting their essential goods and getting to where they need to be. So our transit provider, along with Tony, led the charge to use our existing capacity within our existing transit system to be able to offer that service.
Councillor Chalmers?
Cost, but what is being said is that it's within the current budget because the current system is under capacity. So you're using capacity that's not being used today, essentially.
Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. Tony would need to be brought over to answer anything specifically, but yes, we are using our existing capacity. But when we looked at reductions, which we have been looking at to line them up with ridership numbers, we couldn't reduce the number of specialized service buses without taking away from the services that were already required. So we are using that excess capacity to be able to offer that service.
Okay. Thanks, Your Worship.
Anything further, any member council on item number 5? Okay. Councillor Chalmers, number 6.
And I just want to say, first of all, that I thought this was an excellent report, very thorough. I do have a couple of questions, and so if I might, I guess the first thing is a decision was made by staff with respect to transferring the surplus to tax stabilization fund, which very likely I think probably would have been council's decision. But I am kind of curious as to why staff felt that it was necessary to do it as quickly as it was done, and could it not have waited until a regular council meeting or perhaps a special council meeting?
Brad?
Yes. Through the chair. So as noted, and as you point out, this is not our normal procedure. With respect to the final disposition of the year-end surplus, we do look for council's direction on that. In this case, the reason for the timing was that our audit and our auditors began their process mid-April at the start of last week. We were able to buy an extra week of time before we had them on, not on site, but beginning the process, but it was going to be in advance of this meeting. It is the kind of decision that if council had a drastically different opinion of the best approach, it is something that is reversible. It would have implications in that, and the reason for the timing, it's not just having the information ready for the auditors. There's a lot of balancing entries and review and analysis that need to happen to get the balance sheet and income statement established based on the final decision of the year-end surplus. So we were able to take those steps in early April to be ready for the auditors. So, so ideally, we will stay on this path because there would be implications if we change it. But if council did have an alternate intention in mind, it is the kind of thing that we could find a way. And maybe it's not adjusting the year-end number, but coming to the same result council would have had alternatively with a transfer in the year 2020, for example, as a way to get to where council may have ultimately wanted to be while still keeping the audit on track.
Your worship, through you, I appreciate the response, and given our current financial situation, these monies are probably in the right place because that's probably where we're going to have to draw from to deal with our financial situation in 2020. So I was really less concerned about where the money went as opposed to the principle of how it got there. And I think that, you know, we need to be very careful about that principle. But I certainly appreciate what you're saying, and I agree with your sentiment with respect to what we could do with those dollars if we had to reallocate. Through your worship, my other question of Glenn is, there's a lot of great information in this report that sort of helps you understand where we're under-resourced and where perhaps we're over-resourced. And as you were going through this process, Glenn, did you and the team take a look at how you could sort of reset some of your anticipated spending in 2020 as a result of how things ended in 2019?
There are certainly observations from processes like this. We do need to be mindful and differentiate between things that are unique to that year versus things that are sustainable and ongoing. In some cases, you'll notice there's examples where there was some cost savings in 2019 related to some work that either wasn't needed for the year or could afford to wait. And so at some point, because of things like life cycle, we will need to eventually undertake some of those initiatives. But absolutely, they do lend themselves to identifying opportunities. Same thing with things like capping. We do know that that is something that is one of the variables, the drivers you see in some of the variance numbers we see within the different areas. And again, it is unique a little bit to the year, and we have to look at things like the revenues that go along with some of those positions in some cases, or how much of the underlying work could afford to maybe be delayed, but eventually would need to happen. But absolutely, between the variance reporting, the budget process, and then things like managing through COVID-19, it's definitely an iterative process where we take observations and are able to identify opportunities. And sometimes that just inherently is not necessarily a reduction in the bottom line, but reallocating the resources that we have just to be able to better match them to the demands of the community.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thank you.
Anything further by any member council on item number 6? Nothing. Councillor Hamid, number 7.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just quick questions. The timelines given in the chart for the new fire station and Nipissing and everything else, are those timelines pre-COVID-19 or post-COVID-19?
Again, Glenn, dealing with that.
Yes, so the chart itself, it was prepared and the commentary was reflective of really the pre-COVID-19 circumstances. Not to say that it necessarily changes in all cases, but certainly in some, I would there will be some implications just as we continue to navigate with the team that's spoken to a little bit later in things like the purchasing report.
So follow-up question for Nipissing update. Do we have anything from Metrolinx and their timeline?
For that question, for the latest, I might just see if Commissioner Koopmans has any specific insight she can share, or it may be something we may need to come back with in terms of the latest status.
Through you, Your Worship, we have been in ongoing discussions with Metrolinx, albeit sporadically. They are not proceeding as quickly as we might want. There is an agreement that they're looking for in terms of sort of a a different process, and we're still negotiating terms with them.
Councillor Hamid,
Yep, no, that's all for my questions.
is any other member of council any further on 7? Councillor Hamid, number 8.
Yeah, so quick question about number 8, I guess for Glenn. I know that we hold our long-term investments into maturity, so I assume that there won't be an issue because of market volatility, but just wanted to confirm if any of the recent issues are going to have an impact on our short-term or long-term returns.
Glenn?
So you are right. We hold most of our investments to maturity with a declining interest rate. The impact would be actually the face value of our, or the value of our holdings would actually increase, reflective of the fact they were locked in at higher rates than the market currently may provide for. But the trade-off, if we were to choose to sell some of those securities, would be we wouldn't be able to invest them at the same rate as we currently had. So we do note in the report that at the time of 2019 year end, there was a very minor, almost insignificant difference in terms of the value of the bonds versus if we were to have liquidated them at the time. That number would be a larger difference today because of the change in rates, but we don't expect it to have any impact on our investment strategy or priority because we would intend to hold them, because where we do have longer term holdings, it's matched to the longer term needs of things like our reserves.
Councillor Hamid?
Thank you.
Any other member of council any further on 8? If not, I'm going to move to number 9, and Councillor Challoner, you were first, and I know Councillor Malboof indicated he wants to speak to it as well. So Councillor Challoner first.
The staff report, obviously. This is, in my view, the poster child for not the best use of staff time. And had I not been ill on February 20th, I probably would have put forward a motion to go no further with this. I don't know how many people on the call have had the opportunity to look at a report that was done for the City of London after their last election, but there's 3 notable things. The first thing is it did not change in any way the result of the election by moving to the ranked ballot from first past the post. The second thing is that it cost a lot of money, and staff quite rightly point that out, and that's just a portion of the additional cost that the City of London incurred. The third thing is that most voters did not participate by ranking candidates. They chose a candidate and left it at that. And you know, that could be as a result for many reasons. It could have been just poor communication. But there is a belief that, although unsubstantiated, that they just didn't want to participate. They knew who their desired candidate was. And I would suggest with things like this in future that instead of, you know, municipalities taking the so-called initiative, they turn this back to the province, because at the end of the day, I believe this is a provincial responsibility, not a municipal responsibility. And I hope that the next time, you know, one of these interesting opportunities comes forward through AMO or through the federal federation, that we think about what is a valuable use of our time. And this most certainly, in my view, was a poor use of time. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Malboof?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As much as I support the ranked ballot voting system, I'm in favor of it. I accept the recommendation and support it, because it wouldn't make any sense for us to go that route if the region and the school board weren't on board as well. And I agree with Councillor Challoner. This is provincial legislation. It's their responsibility. And if they believe that's the way all municipalities should go, then we should all go that route or stay first past the post. So again, as much as I support the ranked ballot system, I support the recommendation for now.
Great, thank you very much. Is there any other member of council, anything on item number 9? If I might, just for a moment, I certainly concur with Councillor Challoner and for the most part, Councillor Melbo's sentiments. And I'm well aware of the pros and the cons on this, but I've always been of the opinion that first past the post is the winner, even though I recognize that he or she may not have gotten the majority of the votes, but they certainly got the single biggest majority of the votes. But again, getting back to the London experience, where it's my understanding that it was roughly 10 individuals on the ballot. And believe it or not, you got the best of the worst as mayor in London. That's really the reality of what happened in London. So we got to be very, very careful. And I'm well aware that democracy itself is very, very fragile. So it shouldn't be abused, it should be used. And in my opinion, I think the method that we've used in the province of Ontario that I'm so familiar with has worked reasonably well with first past the post. So with that, I thank you very much for item number 9. Councillor Challoner, number 12, you had a question on 12.
Yes, it was just one item. It was the tree cutting, and I just wanted to understand. It wasn't clear to me why it increased as much as it did, and I just sort of appreciate from staff an explanation as to what changed.
Christine, I think you might be the most appropriate in that area.
Actually, sorry, if I can maybe take a first shot, and then maybe Commissioner Koopmans might need to supplement it. But it was the reason the rewards are coming out the way they are in terms of in the form of contract increases at this point in time. It was really a timing issue. There was an announcement this year about the regulations related to certain windows where work could occur related to the birds and the migratory patterns. So in order to keep these specific projects on track for this year, that pruning work had to occur during the month of March before we hit that window, whereas originally there was anticipated that there might have been a different time frame allowable. So with the changed rules, there was a need to have the work proceed quickly before March ended, which is why you see the 3 awards the way you do here.
Councillor Challoner? Anything further on 12? Nothing further on 12, then there has been no change on any one of the consent items. And again, you heard me read the motion earlier on. I will work on the assumption that the biggest majority of you, if not unanimous, is in favor of that motion. I don't see any hands going up, so that motion is carried. Okay, we do have the one item for consideration, and I will read the resolution, then we'll get into the debate on the item that's report COMS 001-20, and it's the climate change corporate initiatives and updates. And again, I mentioned earlier on, there are 3 official submissions, written submissions that's been forwarded to council. So I do have the motion moved by Councillor Ali and seconded by Councillor Best, and be it resolved, the council approve the proposed 2020 climate change work plan, and the staff be directed to create a 2021 work plan for council approval prior to the 2021 budget deliberations, and that the town commit to achieving the milestones set out in the Partners for Climate Protection, known as PCP. 5 milestone framework as presented in Appendix B. That's the resolution that we will be dealing with in a very short period of time. So, any staff members or any introduction that any member of anyone missed to make? Doug Sapano. Doug, I understand that you're going to be making a presentation on this, so welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and members of council. Just wanted to provide a brief overview of this report and an update and follow-up to the climate change declaration that council made in July of 2019. as well as the direction that was provided as a result of the budget deliberations in December. So just wanted to highlight really for 2020 and bring everyone up to date on the corporate approach to climate change and how the organization is dealing with the, I guess, the overall management of the climate change portfolio. So one of the new things that's taken place in 2020 has been the formation of the Halton CAO group, known as the Halton Climate Action Committee. So the CAOs for all the municipalities in the region are going to be taking a lead role on this file and providing policy direction for all municipalities for a consistent approach. The other thing that staff have done, and we're also participating with the Halton Climate Collective, and that's another organization where all the municipalities have a seat at the table, as well as the school boards and the region. And this is governed by the Halton Environmental Network. All of this information and direction obviously is informing our 2020 work plan. And the big things that we want to move forward with that, as indicated in the report, is we want to proceed with dealing with becoming a member of the Partners for Climate Protection and committing to the 5 steps to join that program. That would be the number one thing. Staff have also been working on developing a web page, which is just about getting ready to launch. It'll be a bit of a work in progress as we continue to fine tune that and tweak that. But we're just about ready to launch that. And that's basically in response to what we heard during the council deliberations, budget deliberations in December, where I think we need to do a better job of communicating the work that's been done and making sure that the community can see the work that's been done. So I'm very excited to see the launch of that website very shortly. Number 3 would be we're also looking at increasing our public awareness campaign. Again, that sort of goes hand in hand with the website development, but we are looking at utilizing Milton Talks and creating a platform for residents and interested citizens to be able to participate with staff on a regular basis on the climate change initiatives and work plans moving forward. When the time is appropriate, we'll figure out how we're going to do an open house here at Town Hall and do some of those community town hall type meetings, again, when the timing is appropriate. And obviously, we're going to continue to support all of the community-led initiatives throughout the community and do that via our social channels and whatnot there. We're also going to continue, or have been continuing, with our corporate initiatives on our regular work plan. That covers everything from, we will be getting back into the planting of trees in the fall when timing is appropriate. Obviously, we've had a little bit of an interruption right now. And the other one, I would say the biggest one that we're dealing with this year will be moving forward with the solar panel installation at Sherwood Community Center, which is still on track, and we will be going ahead with that one as well. Later on in the fall, Council did ask to have a report back on transitioning the town's vehicle fleet over to electric. That will be worked on, and again, will be coming in the fall. And the other bit was another report to come to deal with encouraging development of, in new developments, EV charging stations in future high density applications. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're looking at on the 2020 work plan. Obviously, when we get into start talking about the 2021 work plan, that will sort of go hand in hand with the 2021 budget process and give council some visibility on different projects or initiatives that they would like to see us move forward with. And that's essentially the report in a nutshell. The one thing that we did add at the back as the Appendix 1, again, going back to that information sharing and promoting the work that we've already done. As you can see from the list that's been provided on Appendix 1, there's probably about a good 20-year history of initiatives that have been undertaken over a great length of time. So those are what's going to be forming part of the web page that we're going to launch, just to make sure that the community is well aware of all of our actions that have been taken to date.
Okay, Doug, thank you very much for that. I have a speakers list, and I'm going to get to that in just a very few moments. And again, if there's any questions, comments, observations, and/or opinions, and any other suggestions that any member of council has with this report, certainly I, as one individual, am very receptive and very open to that. So in this order, Councillor Tesser-Dirksen, Councillor Di Lorenzo, Councillor Chalmers, Councillor Best, and Councillor Tulip, in that order. Councillor Tesser-Dirksen first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Doug and Christine, for the report. I do have some prepared questions, but I am going to ask one that just popped in my head actually while you were speaking, Doug, with respect to deciding to join the PCP there and adopting their 5 milestones. One of those is to set an emissions target. Can you comment on where we're at with any targets that we may have already established? And I mean, how realistic is it to adopt the targets they've suggested, which I think are at the appendix there? 20% reduction in corporate emissions over a 10-year period and 6% reduction in community emissions. It's just one line in the milestones, but it holds a lot of implications, I guess. So if you have some comments on that.
Doug?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Tesser-Dirksen. I believe that those targets are the minimum targets that the FCM is suggesting that they feel is achievable. We do track and we do keep an inventory of what our emissions are. We know where they're coming from and how they're being created. That information also will be uploaded onto the webpage shortly. I do think that there will be some heavy lifting to do to achieve a 6%, a 6% community target, a 20% corporate target as well. There will be some heavy lifting involved, and those initiatives to be able to get there will have to be incorporated on an annual basis and into the annual budget process. And at that point, will need to be considered by council as we continue to move forward based on levels of investment. There's will be a wide variety of strategies on how we're going to get there, and that will be everything from carbon offsets, from additional tree planting and forestation, those types of things, as well as figuring out how to obviously reduce our reliance on fossil fuel.
Councillor Tesser-Dirksen?
Yes, thank you. I do have a few more questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So getting to the report, and these are broader questions, Doug. So it is mentioned in there that the progress and the targets or goals that we set will depend somewhat on staff resources. So at this point, there has been some talk about having a dedicated staff person overseeing this, but at this point where we're at, how do our resources fare in comparison to similar municipalities? And I mean, just a brief answer is fine.
Through you, Your Worship, most of the other municipalities, specifically in Halton region, all have a number of dedicated staff in these portfolios, usually in around minimum of 2, somewhere's up 3 to 4. However, our approach at this has been, we've had staff throughout the organization applying a green lens to everything that they do for a good number of years now. So we've had a little bit different approach, but obviously we do not have a dedicated person on this file full time.
Thank you. Do you think, would you say that there might be opportunities that we may be overlooking because we don't have a dedicated staff person looking at this? I appreciate that staff are evaluating their individual tasks and departments through that green lens, but is it a proactive type of work that they're doing, or is it simply when the project comes before them, they're applying the green lens, meaning that not necessarily there isn't someone who's out there seeking out opportunities that we might be overlooking because we just don't have that resource available?
Through Your Worship, I would suggest that staff have done a very good job about applying the green lens to the projects that come across their desk. Yes, could more be done if someone was on the file full time, actively seeking new information, new opportunities and whatnot? Yes, that would be for sure. The one thing that we're probably a little bit behind on, and there's obviously an opportunity to get much better at it, would be the public engagement, the outreach, and the community consultation bit for sure. From a technical standpoint on the projects that have been completed, I would say based on our track record and the accomplishments that you can see that where we've gotten to date, I think we've done staff have done a very good job so far.
Thank you. And actually leading out from that question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, with respect to that public engagement, what's the plan for further engagement? And we do have some community groups that are mobilizing rather effectively. And I know some municipalities actually have a more formal structure with some of their community groups where they're actually including them in some of the implementation of policy, kind of deferring some of the work that we would have to pay a staff person to do. These community groups are taking up in a more formal structured way with the assistance of council and the direction of council. Is that something that could be a possibility for us here in Milton?
Definitely. This has been something that's new, that's sort of just come about recently. And I think that it's great to see this activism within the community. I know I've been working this file for about 9 years now, and it's great to see so much enthusiasm. So definitely looking forward to further communications with that group, and we'll do it obviously through a variety of channels, whether that be Let's Talk Milton. We'll directly engage with these groups as well for more information and information sharing. And at such time, I think it would also be appropriate for us to continue to look at how some other municipalities are doing it and bring that back to council for further consideration.
Councillor Tessa-Dirksen.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate that, Doug, and I know you have been engaging with groups and they appreciate it, and so do we. So thank you for that. Just one final question, and this is with respect to a specific policy review or something we should maybe think about, is with respect to single-use plastics. There's been some talk from the federal level that this will be coming down at some point in the future. How useful would it be to maybe look at a local bylaw to address single-use plastics at this point, to be proactive so that we're ready, so to speak, when the federal regulations come down?
Through your worship, I believe it would be, definitely a step in the right direction for us to start to consider and have those discussions. I know that we are at our own internal operations. We are looking at different ways in trying to get away from any single-use plastics in our operations. However, from a bylaw perspective, if what we're talking about here is, plastic bags and such, and using bylaws with that, where some municipalities have gone there, for that one there, I'm guessing I would have to punt that over to our friend Troy, Commissioner McHarg, to talk about from a bylaw perspective as to how we would go about implementing such a bylaw.
Troy, I'm going to flip over to you now, because I think that's going to be the key to the success or the lack thereof on that particular point. Troy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff haven't done any research on this initiative so far, so what I will say is that my response is not grounded in any legal opinions or anything provided to us. But as with any new regulatory bylaw that council would look to put in place, if the expectation is for bylaw enforcement to enforce, that comes with financial consequences. Having said that, if the federal government is looking to bring in regulations for the country, those obviously would trump anything that we are doing locally. But as I'd mentioned, we haven't done any proactive research on the file as of yet.
Okay, Councillor Tessa-Dirksen, you have the floor.
Yeah, that's it for my questions. I do have some comments. Maybe, are you taking comments later on, Mr. Mayor? Or
Yes, certainly. Yeah, no, we definitely will be.
Thank you.
Okay, just picking up on that before I get to Councillor Di Lorenzo, I think that participation that you alluded to, Councillor Tessa-Dirksen, on the assumption that the recommendation, the resolution passes, I think it incorporates that being done, that partnership with the public. I think that's all encompassing in that resolution if it passes, and I only suspect it will. certainly will with my support, that's for sure. So just one small editorial on that point. Councillor Di Lorenzo, you're next.
Thank you, and thank you for the very well written report on the climate change. So a few questions I had, and I'll try not to reiterate the ones Christine, Councillor Dirksen had. On the Appendix 1, it mentions the community gardens, and I did get some inquiries from residents asking why doesn't Milton have community gardens similar to other municipalities, and they were surprised to realize we actually have two, one at Sunnymount Park and one at I have a brain freeze on the other location.
I think it's Allendale.
Allendale. Yes, it's my understanding that there's overwhelming demand for these two. And one question I had is, are we looking at expanding this? So I look at similar sized municipalities compared to Milton of around 100,000 plus. Many of them have over a dozen community gardens, and usually they have them when they're building new public parks. They incorporate community gardens as part of the new park rollouts, and there seems to be a lot of demand within Milton. At least many residents aren't even aware that we have two, and the two that we have already have, I understand it, a large demand and waiting list. So I was wondering if we were going to look at in the future rolling out community parks, community gardens in new town lands and partnering with increased groups and raising more awareness so residents are aware that we do have community gardens. Realizing right now raising that awareness might not work just because of the large demand and the limited space we have.
Doug, on that point?
Through your worship, yes, we have. We just completed the community garden out at Sunnymount Park. I believe that was about 2-3 summers ago, and have been, very, very happy to see the uptake that's been there. And I believe they're actually at the point now where there's a waiting list. We have been in discussions with that particular group about potentially expanding that and adding some more gardening plots in that area. And for sure is definitely one of our as we begin to formulate our 2021 work plan, we'll put together a menu of options for council to consider at budget time as to either further expansion of community gardens and other green type initiatives that we'll put in there, and can certainly consider that as part of any new park developments as well.
Councilor Di Lorenzo.
Thank you for that. So one other question I had, which is similar to Councillor Dirksen's, is partnering with local groups in Milton. So I know the report mentions partnering with Halton Climate Collective and the greater region, but if you look at other municipalities, I'll give Kingston as an example. Kingston is a similar population size to the town of Milton, and they've actually set up an arm's length third-party group that's engaged with local businesses, with the city of Kingston, with the province of Ontario. So the municipality has a stake in their local environmental group and helps direct it, but it's also comprised of other groups. It's a local group set up, and again, they look to leverage the green economy, leverage residents, leverage local businesses, and it's a partnership with the municipality and multiple groups in that municipality. So I heard the mayor mention that we were potentially looking at that, maybe setting up a working group or setting up some type of seed partnership with local groups, because I would like us to consider, again, partnering with local groups, not just Halton region. There are a lot of environmental groups in Milton, Milton Green, Sustainability Milton. Several of them want to be more engaged with the town. So I'm hoping that part of this report does mention something like the mayor has said, as saying like a future working group where the town and these groups meet on a regular basis. And that may eventually evolve to something similar to what you see in other municipalities across Ontario. And I would ask if you could please look at the city of Kingston as an example, because it's a similar sized municipality to our town of Milton, and they have started a few years ago, started many different programs that have grown and used funding models where it's not just funded by the municipality, but they're looking for sponsorship, provincial, federal, business, resident, a lot of different funding models where it's not just on the local taxpayer group. And they started many different initiatives going forward. So just echoing what Councillor Tessler-Dirksen and the mayor said. And the question is I guess, when the mayor talked about we're looking at partnering with local groups, how is that going to start going forward? Is it a working group, or is it just meetings on a regular basis, or what would that local partnership look like?
Doug?
Through your worship, right now, kind of how I see this playing out, and obviously we're probably a few months behind of where we were planning to be for 2020 based on the current situation. However, I think we need to learn how to walk with this before we run, so to speak. So I think the first step is for us to have some meetings and have some discussions with the groups. And as soon as we can get to that and have some meaningful discussions and see what everybody has to offer and sort of forge some ideas and options to be able to come back and present something to council with some options, we'll be taking that on immediately. So,
Councillor Di Lorenzo.
Thank you. One last question I had is, I know the report mentions different LEED certifications. I know there's 4 of them: certified, silver, gold, and platinum. I know other municipalities have set sort of a minimum threshold that all new buildings need to be either silver or gold or certified a certain level. Is the town of Milton looking at it at a case-by-case basis, or are we considering setting sort of a minimum standard where all new facilities are going to be certified at a minimum of silver or gold? I realize right now we have a wide range of certifications at the different levels. I wasn't sure would there be a benefit of setting a level that the town is going to seek on all new facilities, or are we going forward still on a case-by-case basis, some being a lower certification and some being a higher certification?
I think that's a critical question there. As a matter of fact, Councillor Di Lorenzo, and again, I know the almighty dollar will dictate a lot of that, I suspect, moving forward. But again, Doug, I'm not sure on that range of gold, silver, platinum. What's your thoughts on that?
Through you, your worship, the LEED certification is definitely something that we've been working through and working towards on a case-by-case basis, based on budget availability on each individual project. As we continue to move forward down this climate change discussion, I think the joining of the Partners for Climate Protection, and if we're going to be setting targets and trying to reach emission targets over the course of a 10-year horizon, I think that that's definitely going to have to be part of the conversation moving forward. It will be up to council to decide whether or not we want to, make a policy statement and say that we want to go for LEED Gold or LEED Platinum on every particular, project that we undertake, or we can continue to do it on a case-by-case and project-by-project basis and build it into the annual work plans and bring it back to council annually, for consideration and discussion. There is quite a cost associated with the different levels, and not to mention the cost of actually going through the certification process as well. So I think it would be best to provide council all of that information during budget and as these projects come about, to determine the best path forward. Having said that, I think more information regarding climate change, emissions, what the value will be by pursuing those, how it's going to relate to what those emission targets are, would be helpful for council to have that information in hand to make an informed decision.
Councillor Di Lorenzo.
Thank you for that answer. And thank you again for the report. It highlights a lot of the work that the town of Milton has already done on climate change and sustainability, and looking forward to future actions. Thank you.
Now, and again, thank you, Councillor Di Lorenzo. Before I get to Councillor Chalmers there, again, at the risk of a small editorial on your point there, with regards to where I see the structure of this going. And again, I don't want to see it drop from the radar screen. I think it's only onward and upward dealing with this. I think the structure is going to be important, and I'm not suggesting just an advisory committee to council. Whoever participates in there setting up some kind of a committee, I think it's important getting thoughts, getting direction. This is the way that I see some of this moving forward. So then Councilor Di Lorenzo, this is what you was alluding to, and I'm very supportive of public engagement in this. Just how that evolves, I'm not exactly sure. Who should be the participants, how many, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where I think we have to or should rely on staff to suggest a structure coming forward. Once we get through this COVID-19, and again, moving forward with this one here as well, I think it's going to be important. But Councilor Di Lorenzo, you did have the floor. That was my editorial on that. Is there anything further you have?
No, and thank you for that editorial. I agree with what you just said. Thank you, sir.
And I thank you. Councilor Chalmers.
Thanks, Your Worship. The note was made about objectives, milestones, goalposts, etc., and the current FCM milestones. And I would suggest that if it's possible, and I would appreciate Doug's thoughts about this, that we set our own objectives, that we not rely on FCM or others, because when you take a look at, for example, the Government of Canada objectives that they committed to Paris, they're not meeting them. They can't meet them. They won't meet them. And, are we setting ourselves up for failure as a municipality by, agreeing to someone else's objectives? And maybe we should take a look at, what we are doing, what we reasonably can do, and set objectives that, in fact, we can meet.
Doug, on that, the last thing that I certainly want to do is set ourselves up for failure. I want to, at all costs, avoid that. Doug?
Through your worship, through the 5 steps, I think probably the best part for us to go through would be to go through those 5 steps and see what that potentially could mean. Obviously we do have an inventory. Step 1 is gathering the inventory and preparing a forecast. We need to do a little bit of work on that forecast, and obviously Milton's in a little bit of a unique situation, being a growing municipality, and trying to figure out how we're going to be dealing with reductions when all that's happening is the adding of housing inventory, commercial building activity, and those types of things. So we're going to have to be, we're going to have a good understanding of how we're going to deal with those numbers moving forward. If it's going to be, on a per capita basis type of strategy. There is the minimum goal reduction targets that PCP recommends. Some municipalities have gone beyond that. As we continue to move forward with developing and looking at what that action plan is and trying to get real about what that is, I can say for certain that, myself and my colleagues, no one here wants to be recommending any sort of targets or numbers, aspirational goals for 10 years from now if they're not realistic and not achievable. And again, it needs to be made in Milton and fit what's happening in Milton for sure.
Your Worship, I believe with respect to the question on single-use plastics, that really is a regional discussion. They have responsibility for waste management, and we don't have the authority to pass a bylaw with respect to single-use plastic. And to Troy's comment about enforcement, we don't have that authority either. This has been looked at by other municipalities already, and lower tier municipalities simply don't have that authority. It's an upper tier responsibility, those who have responsibility for waste management. Should it be looked at? Sure, it absolutely should. Your Worship, there were a number of thoughts in the appendix at the back, and various speakers today have talked about some of the things they'd like us to consider. And Doug responded with, providing background information to council on some of these matters, and I think that's vitally important. I think the other lens, when I look at some of these things, and I'd appreciate his thoughts about this, is the market. So, for example, charging stations. Today, we're starting a process in the province of Ontario where gas stations are installing them and there is a fee to use them. And, you know, does that change in your mind, Doug, how we should be looking at charging stations, knowing that the market is coming to the marketplace with charging stations where a fee is charged?
Doug, on that point?
Through your worship, the biggest gains to be made in GHG emissions obviously are in the transportation side of things. The numbers overwhelmingly, you know, spell that out for us. I do agree that I'm not quite sure what our, you know, there is a fuel distribution network out there for dealing with these things and transportation side of things. Ultimately, again, that would be council's decision as to whether or not we wanted to be seen as early adopters and promoters of those types of things for folks that are parking at our facilities. There are some facilities, we do have them over at the Mattamy National Cycling Center. We have been lobbied from several folks and residents over the past few years about installing more. And generally our approach has been that if we can obtain these through some sort of funding mechanism, through through FCM and whatnot, where there's someone else is paying for this, that's kind of the approach that we've taken so far. But again, you know, it would be council's call as to whether or not, you know, council's wishes are that we should be promoting that on the transportation side of things, or we should just let the private market deal with it.
Councillor Chandler?
Your worship, I just want to know from Doug how pervasive recycling is in town of Milton facilities today.
Doug?
Through your worship, we have recycling at all facilities right now. We're extremely strong on the cardboard and the plastics and those types of things. The one thing that we've not been very big in the organic side of recycling. That's just basically from a resource where we tried it. We end up with a lot of cross-contamination and things usually end up getting into the waste stream on that. And that's again something that we would look forward to. Behavioral changes with our customers and residents sort of moving forward as we continue to market awareness and awareness of programs and what it is that we're doing. So, and again, obviously if there's any things that we're missing, we can certainly look to enhance those as well.
Chandler?
Your worship, on that note, then I note, and I'm supportive of refillable necks on fountains. Totally agree with that. Have always advocated for that. But the comment beside it about you know, plastic bottles going into waste streams into landfill is not accurate if in fact we have you know, pervasive recycling programs in all of our facilities, because there is a place for plastic or aluminum or glass to go. So you might want to revise that statement somewhat if we have a proper recycling system in place in the town of Milton. Your worship, my other question is around our relationship with the region when it comes to recycling. And Doug, I'm referring not only to beverage recycling, organic recycling, but also recycling of construction materials that come from either, you know, facilities that we're building or facilities that we're disposing of. So as an example, the old post office, what is your knowledge of what happened to those materials? And then secondly, what is our relationship with the region today such that they could become a partner and help us even further develop our recycling systems across our facilities?
Just before I get to Doug, Councillor Chandler, just on the recycling of the materials from the old post office, that was fairly high on all of our priority lists, including mine, that was properly done. Again, Doug can take a shot at your question there, but again, Councillor Best is next on my speaker list, but I'm going to also defer to him because he's been chair of the Regional Planning and Public Works there. He's very close to a lot of that stuff. So just a heads up to Councillor Best, I'll be going to him and his thoughts in that area in just a few moments. So Doug, on Councillor Chandler's observations and questions.
Sure. Through you, talking about the post office, I can certainly attest to, if for those that have been around town hall and watched that building be decommissioned and taken apart, that was has been a fairly lengthy process, and that was all driven by separating and sorting and making sure that all those building materials have been recycled and going into the right recycling streams. So that's fairly typical for all of our construction projects. And that is also one of the requirements of the LEED certification program, of how those construction debris has been, is sorted, recycled, and eliminating as much as possible that does end up in the waste stream. So that's always top of mind. In regards to our relationship with the region, I would suggest especially regarding waste, we have a great relationship with the region. We meet with them on a fairly regular basis on different initiatives. When special events come about, i.e. the street festival and whatnot, they're actively engaged. It is a very positive working relationship to figure out what different things that we can do, enhance or upgrade, and not only from the intake, but also how it's going to work better for them when they're receiving the goods. So that relationship works very well, and we'll continue to work through that partnership with them moving forward.
Councillor Best, is there anything you have to add further to Councillor Chalmers' questions and Doug's observations and information?
I agree with Doug. Actually, I'll send all councillors a copy of the regional strategic plan that Councillor Cluett and I serve on Planning Public Works. Staff are looking at increasing recycling and reuse. So there is a number of efforts there, as well as the waste management site. If anyone noticed it recently, they are making some upgrades to the property as well to accommodate more materials. So it is coming along, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers, you have the floor.
Those are my questions, Your Worship. I have a few comments at the end.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Best, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for your comments earlier. Doug, just one question or request. I noticed there is some references to Milton Hydro. There is going to be some changes at the staffing at Milton Hydro, and Councillor Malbuff and I are having a meeting later this afternoon. Hopefully we can make it regarding where we're going with the Milton Hydro. So just ask that you keep them involved with any committees or staff work, because they're have some ability to access funding and programs that the town may not be able to have access to.
Okay, I think that's probably a comment more than a question, but I'm only going to assume that Doug, you will be doing that.
Through Your Worship, yes, I will be. We have been working very closely with Hydro for a number of years, as well as the gas, and we will continue to do so.
Councillor Best, any further?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cluett.
Thank you, Your Worship, and again, thanks for the great report. I'm really excited to see a list of the things that we have been doing over the years regarding environmental and climate change initiatives. There's been a lot of people saying that we don't see the town doing these things, and this I think we've talked about it before, where we needed to have an opportunity to toot our horn, and we've actually gone through a number of these things, and letting people know that we're actually doing them. One of the questions I had is on I think it was page 2 of the appendix. They were talking about, you talked about the gray water systems that we have at the Milton Sports Center, where we collect and store the rainwater from the roofs and use them for water closets. Is there any plans to, A, for future facilities to provide this type of system in place, and B, as time goes on, to possibly retrofit or to do some retrofitting to our current facilities to collect the gray water? Because I think it's a great resource for to saving water.
Doug?
Yes, through Your Worship. Yes, we'll continue to look at that on a case-by-case basis and project by project, and implement all of the things and lessons that we've learned from all of our previous projects wherever possible. Another one, obviously, that we're still working on the list and have a few things to add there, but that does also come to mind off the top of my head. We also have one of those cistern systems where we're reusing that rainwater for our irrigation system here at Town Hall as well. So we do have those types of amenities, if you will, that have been installed in different buildings, and obviously we'll continue to build upon them wherever possible and where it's appropriate.
No, that's great. No, that's fantastic. It's a, like I said, it's a good initiative, obviously, to saving water. And I know it's been brought up at the school boards to possibly do the same kind of thing when they're building new schools is to collect the rainwater. I'm going to throw some comments in at first. Also, I do agree with the approach that we're taking, working with the other Halton area municipalities on this. We're working together with the 4 municipalities. We've got that large working group with the Halton Environmental Network and other community organizations. Instead of 4 municipalities working singularly as opposed to working in tandem, it's always better to work together and share resources and information. Obviously, the community gardens have been brought up, which is something that the province announced as an essential service. And I do want to echo Doug Cimpano's comments that it's good that we start with a walk before we start running and try to catch up or to do whatever with other municipalities. So overall, this is a great report. I do endorse the recommendation brought forward by staff, and looking forward to contributing more into letting people know exactly what the town of Milton is doing from the climate change initiative.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cluett. Councillor Ali, you're the last speaker that I have on my list at this moment. And then we'll be getting to the second time speakers for any questions or any comments that they have. Councillor Ali.
Your Worship, I have one question left. All of the questions have been asked by my respectable colleagues so far. My question is that when we talk about developing a local action plan, do we have the intention of including our local youth groups in that local action plan?
I would only hopefully assume so, but Doug?
Through your worship, yes, we would definitely be including local youth as well.
Thank you, Doug. So I highly recommend you reach out to the Milton Youth Task Force. We have a subcommittee that is the Green Environment Committee that we have created within the Youth Task Force that is specifically dealing with these things. There are a bunch of really passionate youth individuals who honestly we can all learn from. So that is my recommendation at this point. I do have some comments to add. I don't know if this is a good time to do that, Your Worship.
Yeah, most definitely, because I'm going to get into that. So you're the last speaker, but you're first to go with your comments.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. I just want to reiterate what Councillor Challoner said, that, we need to take it, this issue on our own individual basis. And I know there's many who have talked about Halton working as a whole, with each municipality working as one team. That is good. But we also have to remember that Milton is unique in the way that we are the fastest growing. The challenges we face, none of the other municipalities are facing in Halton. So I do believe in a very local kind of indigenous solution for this issue coming out of Milton. I am really impressed with the work Sustainable Milton Group is doing. They are all local Miltonians, very highly qualified. All the meetings I've attended, I've been very, very impressed with their qualifications and the ideas they're coming up with and the direction they're going in. And I agree with Doug that we need a Made in Milton solution, and also that we need to walk before we run. So because we are in a very unique situation, pandemic-wise, it's unprecedented. We have unique challenges this year. So when I read on page 4 of the file of this report that council may want to consider a dedicated staff position, it makes me happy, but it also makes me realize that we have to be realistic in our expectations because this is a very different budget year. Other than that, I appreciate staff putting forward this report. I have learned so much. I had no idea we were doing so much in our town, such green initiatives were going on. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of residents also learned a lot from this report. I'm fully supportive. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Councillor Ali, for that. And again, second time around, I'm going to go for her comments as well. Councillor Tesser Dirksen, you indicated earlier on that you had some closing comments. Councillor Tesser Dirksen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just really quickly, I want to acknowledge that we did have some written submissions from delegates. It's kind of, the flavor's a little different because we don't have people in front of us to ask questions off of. And so I just want to make sure that we remember that we had those submissions made. I believe there were 3, one from Ian Thompson, one from Wendy Roberts, and then one from Sustainable Milton. And if you go through those submissions, you'll see common themes that pop up. And a lot of them we've touched on here as well. They're asking for solid, robust metric by which we can measure our progress and outline our targets and our goals. They're looking for resources to match those goals. And again, resources are going to be in the form of people power, whether we have someone dedicated at the town of Milton, which eventually I think we're going to need, or for the time being, we engage with the community. And that's really the third theme, engaging with the community, engaging with the public. These are folks who are highly organized, mobilized, they're passionate about the issues. I think we've all seen a real shift in the past, 5 years or so, where the tide is really turning with the sentiment among the population about how we have to attack this issue. And we're going to see more and more of our community mobilizing in this way, and they expect to see leadership from us. And I'm happy with the report because that's a good step in the right direction. So I thank Doug and his department for putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And before I get to Councillor Di Lorenzo, I might just indicate, as far as I'm concerned, from what I can read with those submissions, those 3 submissions that you alluded to, I think for the most part, I think it's safe to say that they're supportive of what we're attempting to do. And again, a small editorial on my part. So, which is great to see that there's those individuals, albeit there's only 3 submissions. But I think, in my opinion, we're headed in the right way. So, thank you. Councillor Di Lorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question in regards to single-use plastics. I remember some people were mentioning it, talking about the climate change report. I've seen other municipalities in Ontario have either looking at or have already passed some bans on single-use plastics. So my question is to Doug, is I thought, based on other municipalities, Fort Frances is an example, passing things for the local municipality, having full or partial bans on single-use plastics. Are we able to do that? I thought we have the authority just because other municipalities in Ontario have already passed that. Or have those other municipalities passed legislation where they weren't legally authorized to pass? It's a question to see what is possible. I'm not advocating that we should right now pass such a ban. I just thought that it was within the town of Milton's ability if we choose to do so.
Okay, I see Christina with her hand up. Christina, maybe you can answer that. And again, Councillor Best and Councillor Clute, who is on the region on planning and public works, and this is where some of this handles. So either of you 2 gentlemen might have a comment on that as well. But Christina, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, it's Christine here. Through your worship, I believe that what we need to do a little bit more research, but some of the places that Councillor Di Lorenzo may be referring to may be single-tier municipalities that also have waste collection as part of their mandate. So we can certainly do a little bit more research and get back on where the authority levels are, but I do believe that Councillor Challoner hit the nail on the head when he said it's dependent on where waste collection resides.
Councillor Best or Councillor Clute, either one of you gentlemen, from the regional perspective, where we're at?
Same thing. From what the information that I have and I've heard before, same thing. Councillor Challoner said that if there is going to be a plastics ban, it would have to be at the regional level. The local municipalities wouldn't have, again, the authority to pass such. And like Christine mentioned, the ones that the municipalities that everybody talks about that have passed the plastics ban are single tier municipalities, and Halton region obviously is a double tier. So
keeping in mind, Councillor Di Lorenzo, you still have the floor, but Councillor Best, have you any further to add?
No, that's the same answer. Basically, it's the upper level that does the collection and management.
Councillor Di Lorenzo, back to you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, very good. Okay, nothing further, Councillor Di Lorenzo? Councillor Challoner, you're the last person that I have on this item unless I see another hand go up in the next few minutes. So Councillor Challoner.
Your worship, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm very supportive in principle of what the report asks of us to support. Obviously, the new lens is what is happening to us as a municipality these days and as a province, as a country. And I think that, you know, council and staff would be wise to make sure that we continue with the right priorities. And there are things in here that Doug is advocating and the team is advocating that we can do despite what is happening to us as a municipality financially. And there are other things that we're going to have to weigh. But I think Doug is and Christine and the team have hit on the most important thing. And that is the municipality and its residents need to understand what we are doing and what we have done. And we've done a poor job of communicating that. And now we have the opportunity to make everybody aware of what we have achieved, and it is substantial. And I hope that at some point in the future, when our bearings are better as a municipality financially, that we have the opportunity as council and staff to determine what is the best made in Milton approach. Because I think that that's critical in terms of the municipality feeling good about what it's doing and its residents feeling good about what it is doing. But I am supportive and thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Is there any further speakers on the climate change report, COMS-001-20? Okay, and you heard me read out the resolution there earlier on. If there's no further questions, I will assume that this is carried unanimously. Unless I see a hand go up like this, I'll assume it is carried. Those in favor of the motion on that assumption, it's carried. Thank you, members of council. Again, moving forward with our agenda, I have a resolution moved by Councillor Ali and second by Councillor Best, and be it resolved, bylaws numbers 027-2020 through and included 030-2020 be read, passed and numbered, and that the mayor and the town clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaws, seal them with a seal of the corporation, that they be engrossed in the bylaw book. Are there any questions on the third reading of any of these bylaws? If not, I will assume that we're all in favor of it, then unless I see a hand. Again, motion's carried. Following the agenda, regional council update, and again, as everyone probably knows, there's not been any regional council meetings in the past month. But to any of my regional colleagues, is any one of you anything that you wish to add at this point in time? Not seeing any indication, I might just add before adjournment here that and I know my regional colleagues are certainly well aware of it. The four mayors, we got together, heads together one day last week on suggesting calling a regional meeting. Just more for anything financial updates and where we are in a coordinated effort. So that's probably going to happen sometime, I suspect, early in May. But that's for my local elected colleagues to be aware that the region, there's not been a meeting, and I think the next schedule, and again, my regional colleagues can correct me, it seems to me that it was May the 20th, but the four mayors are suggesting we should maybe get together prior to that. So that's just for your information more than anything else. So with that, to my regional colleagues, is there anything on that particular point? Okay, we will move forward. Now, I'm going to read this resolution here, and again, I'm going to suggest giving us about a 2-minute break, And Nina, I'm going to be going to you in just a few moments. I know you and Jeff are going to be coordinating the in-camera session, and we'll be reconvening in that. And then, of course, we'll have to come out of in-camera as well. So there's a bit of a process that we'll have to go through there. So just bear with us. But I have a resolution moved by Councillor Elliott and seconded by Councillor Best, and be it resolved that Council convene into confidential session to discuss labor relations and employee negotiations with respect to COVID-19 human resources update. Are there any questions on this resolution? Being none, I will assume that we're in favor of that. So this motion carried. So Nina, over to you. I will adjourn this portion of the council meeting. Meeting adjourned. Nina, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Krantz. Jeff and IT, if I can just ask you to stop YouTube feed and just if you can give us confirmation when that has been stopped. Attendees, all of our support staff, I will